How's it going, guys? My name's Graham and welcome to Two Left Thumbs, and an ultimate revised edition of my Deltarune Chapter 1 Secrets, Easter Eggs, and References video, which as a series has come to be known as Gaster Eggs. I have been working on revising old videos and moving them over here. I really did not want to take them down from the original channel since they collectively have millions of views. They're the first things I ever did that went viral. It's very special to me, and I realized what I could do instead is completely re-edit them, reorganize them, and have it as the ultimate Deltarune Chapter 1 viewing experience all in one place. Without further ado, here are those 4 videos chopped up into one place. Probably the simplest and most obvious thing I can start with is that Deltarune is an anagram for Undertale. Similarly, we have Rouxls and Asriel, and Chris is an anagram of Frisk minus the F, so it doesn't really work out. Susie is an anagram for issue, and Chris is an anagram for risk. Yes, these are both true. Issue kinda seems like maybe sorta kinda a thing, but if you ask me, they're just coincidence words. One could say that perhaps issue and risk are unrelated. But hey, I certainly don't want to stop people from speculating. I wouldn't put it past Toby to make every single name in the game an anagram. So maybe issue and risk do become important in Chapter 2, we'll have to wait and see. Mostly I just wanted the on-screen joke of the fact that Deltarune and Undertale shared their letters with several specific words and phrases. Yeah, there's some weird ones in there. Also, it is just kind of interesting that Chris, specifically spelt this way, is the name for a specific type of knife, which at the very end of the game obviously plays a fairly important role. That could be another just coincidental thing though. Once you have one completed file, the background changes to the 3 heroes standing in front of the fountain. As far as I know, there's no special interactions when you create a specific vessel, but there are a few interesting dialogue alternates you can get when you choose specific names for the vessel and the creator. So there's quite a few names in this opening section that can give you a special bit of dialogue. Specifically, I'm punching in Susie right now, but if you do Susie, Chris, Noelle, Toriel, Asriel, Asgore, Sans, Papyrus, Alphys, Undyne, Rudy, Birdly, Caddy, Braddy, Gerson, Jockington, or QC, then you do end up getting the exact same prompt. An interesting coincidence, and that's all it is. It just acknowledges the fact that you picked a name that exists within the game. If you were to do the vessel name as anything else and the creator name as one of those, it would give you a similar prompt. And if you name them both the same thing, of course, of course they are the same. Just a little bit of extra flavor text there. So for this example, I made the vessel Chris and the creator Susie. You're about to meet someone very, very wonderful. That actually happens when you make the creator Susie Chris. It does not work for Rouxls. But the interesting thing is it does work for Noelle. It's those 3 characters, Susie, Chris, and Noelle. So maybe Rouxls is the interesting character they're about to meet, but there is no Noelle in the Dark World. I don't know, there's a lot of questions there. This is a little bit of a fake out, a play on very, very interesting, seen in Gaster's lab entry number 17, a well-known, well-hidden secret in Undertale. 2 more that are slightly more interesting. If you name the character Gaster, then the game restarts, it goes back to the intro cutscene again, you have to redo everything. If you name the creator Gaster, the game just straight up crashes. You have to actually go back into your files and reopen the game altogether. The exe file name changes as you're playing the game, goes through the dark, the return, the death, and after you complete the game, it just becomes Deltarune. This one is a little on the nose, but the literal Deltarune is returning from Undertale. It's a recurring symbol. We would see Toriel wearing it directly on her shirt. So yeah, that one's right out in the open. The Deltarune shows up all over the place. It's a very common recurring theme as it would be, but you can see here on like the one on your carpet, the 2 outer triangles point upwards and the middle one points down. So it's very strange that on Toriel's house specifically, it looks like the 2 outer ones are pointing down and the middle one is pointing up. Could be crazy, but I think that's the only instance in the entire game where it is that way. There's a flower poster on the wall there. We can obviously read into that if we want to. It's a beautiful day outside. In Undertale, that's pretty ominous because it's what Sans says to you in the genocide run right before the boss fight. I don't know if this is one of the random chance type events. Some people have suggested it's tied to the save file slot you use, but the contents of Asriel's drawer actually changes. The drawer is mostly empty except for a school cross-country shirt with a tear in it. Then if you check it a second time, there's nothing useful in this drawer. The drawer is mostly empty except for a coupon book. Every coupon is for half off a large pizza. All the coupons expired before the book's print date. Just splendidly useful. And there's a third option that I don't have footage for. A very old school ID with an embarrassing haircut. There is one more absolutely hilarious, amazing thing in this bedroom that I cannot believe no one pointed out to me before. Thank you to the one lone commenter who seems to have found this. Either it was that obvious or that subtle, but it's so good. The mirror upstairs, it says, "It's only you." When checked in Undertale, it exclaims, "It's you." If you decide to call your home phone when you're standing directly beside it, it rings, the phone is ringing, but you can't get it. You're already on the phone after all. There's kind of an endless logic loop happening there. This is just a goofy bit of messing with Toriel you can do if you just flush the toilet over and over again. On the third flush, she comes knocking. "Chris, is everything alright in there?" On the sixth flush, she knocks a little more frantically. "Chris, what are you doing? You did not put a bath bomb in the toilet again, did you?" And on the ninth flush, she comes knocking again. "Chris, if anything bad happens, you are paying for the plumbing bill." And there's no more beyond that. It's just the three separate little dialogues. It's a trash can. Somehow, it's emitting a pleasant floral scent. I have to skip ahead to the end of the game a little bit. Asgore in the Overworld is now running a flower shop. Asgore, trying to patch things up with your mother, gives you a bouquet of flowers, which you can then give to Toriel like the nice child that you are. But she's not too stoked on the fact that they came from Asgore. "Worry not, Chris, I will find some place for them." This smelled all flowery and nice, but if you leave and come back into the house, first of all, Toriel comments on the fact that you're being super active. Perhaps you can use some of that energy to wake up on time. Your brother cannot carry you to school anymore, you know. But if you go check in the trash can, somehow its floral scent has increased, and it quickly becomes apparent that he is continually sending these flowers to Toriel, and she's throwing them straight into the trash every time. Damn, can't catch a break. What did you do, Asgore? Killing all the humans again, are you? While we're talking about this here now, you can keep playing around with this actually, and come and go from the house several more times to push that interaction further. It takes quite a few ducking ins and outs. "Chris, why do you keep leaving and coming back? Would you like me to install a revolving door?" So instead of throwing these flowers on the floor or giving them to Toriel where they're inevitably going to end up in the trash, give them to Alphys. Oh, Chris, do you want to talk about something? Have the flowers. Oh, these flowers, they're from your dad? He always asks how you're doing in school, then gives me a bouquet of them. Actually, that he always gives me flowers. Really makes me wonder if he likes the awesome comics I lent to him. Honestly, he kind of reminds me of a superhero, Chris. He's huge and can kick my ass. So you know they go somewhere where they'll be appreciated. A lot of people have speculated that maybe all of this in the trash is a result of Toriel repeatedly throwing out all of Asgore's flowers. This little bit of dialogue gives the sense that these are all intended for Alphys and that she's actually taking care of them here. Her chair, straight out of Undertale, it's the Toriel, the beloved living room chair. I guess it's a reference, maybe it's just a joke, I don't know, I like it though. At the beginning of the game when Toriel is driving you to school, you can see a Frogget for just a fraction of a second there who doesn't appear again in the game at all. Also, come on Mom, she drives us to school, drives herself to school, and then at the end of the game rags on us for not just walking ourselves home. Very hypocritical. Just kind of an interesting little parallel here. I don't think there's a lot to read into, but it is interesting that in the overworld, when you're trying to make your group, you cannot pair off. It's no longer an option. Your only option is to join up in a group of 3. And then later on down in the dark world, your only option is to make a group of 3. Pretty on the nose, but kind of an interesting little thing that occurred. On the wall here, we have, looks like motivational quotes from various literature. Try your best, Astral Wolf, even in your darkest hour. That one seems to be from a video game. I thought that maybe Astral Wolf was a joke about Star Fox, but people have said that it's lifted from Okami. I could be wrong and it might be totally made up. I couldn't find the exact quote. People have said that maybe Susie eating chalk and the fact that there's a green crayon missing from your desk at the start of the game is a reference to another homestuck character. There's someone who eats everything who's green and someone who eats chalk. These could just be weird coincidences, but who knows? Toby did a lot of work on Homestuck. It wouldn't be that big of a stretch. Are you ready for the Sadie Hawkman's dance? I don't think this is super common or well known anymore these days, but Sadie Hawkins dances are ones where the girls invite the boys. It's like a fun little tradition that they used to do back in high school, and I'm not sure if it's common enough for people to know offhand, so that's what that is referencing there. But this one's a little different. In this dance, all the chaperones wear giant hawk heads and screech at any students that make contact while dancing. It's a little more aggressive. For the life of me, I can't find the exact sound effect, but this little gasp sounds like it was lifted straight out of The Legend of Zelda. This one is more of just, I think, a convenience for players who have played the game more than once. It's only accessible if you've already beaten the game, but it does kind of have some interesting story implications. It's your bed. If you go back to sleep, you may miss a lot of important things. They make sure to highlight that. Will you go to bed? Sleep. For some reason, you decided to go back to sleep. But when you opened your eyes, boom! It cuts all the way ahead to when you're actually already in the dark world. So all that stuff in the morning with Toriel, the school, everything gets skipped. I think this is only available if you are playing the game for the second time. A wrist protector, and it just lets you speed through dialogue much more easily. Another very helpful thing for people who are doing multiple playthroughs. Now, the first time you ever get down into the dark world, on the second screen there's a place where you can stop and save. When you go to save, there's actually already an entry there. Chris has a save file, specifically Chris. But once you click save, you don't save as Chris, you save as whatever you titled your creator as. The first time I played, it happened so quickly I didn't even stop and think about it. So thank you to everyone who commented about that. There's no way that isn't significant. Another thing that I find interesting about it though, any additional save file or second playthrough or anything you do, when you come to the dark world, it is empty. Chris has already been overwritten. They're gone. Something that was very commonly asked in the comments there. What happens if you play through the entire game without saving? That is an excellent question, but unfortunately it has no impact on the game. I was really excited for like a secret ending or something, but no dice. I want to slow this down kind of frame by frame, because as you're playing the game it might be hard to tell. The first two flashes are Lancer, but the final one is Susie as she runs and hides. When Susie asks you to lead the way, if you go the opposite direction, she totally bails on you for not knowing the proper directions. This one might be reading a bit too far, but when Rouxls has the cloak on, he looks an awful lot like the river person. But you know, that might just be how Toby draws cloaks, so I don't want to speculate on that too much. Interestingly, Rouxls and Flowey give you the exact same tutorial. See that heart? That's your soul, the very culmination of your being. It varies by like a word or two, but it's essentially the same thing. Major Undertale spoilers here, but this makes a lot of sense. Flowey ends up being Asriel, and Rouxls is obviously some sort of analogous character to Asriel. So them presenting the tutorials in the same way just goes hand in hand with that. It'll be interesting to see how they develop Asriel and or Rouxls in the larger game. When you're fighting the dummy, you can hug the dummy, or you can just hug Rouxls over and over again. This is kind of an interesting string of dialogue that happens. On the third one, he actually says, "I've never been hugged by anyone before," and starts to blush. besides the dummy to test it out. He's practiced hugging on the dummy. So I don't know anything about it. Sorry, I suppose you're the one teaching me. Ha. And then any hug after the third just becomes kind of uncomfortable. Just like if you tried to hug someone 3 times in real life. Now, if you get Chris and Rouxls facing in opposite directions, as close as you can possibly get them to one another, it's kind of difficult to get it so that Chris is behind Rouxls. It's much easier when they're on the exact same plane as one another. But eventually, Rouxls gets kind of bashful, looks down, and blushes. It's very cute. It just kind of reminds me of the hugging from earlier on in the game. In the opening part of the Dark World, there's this hole in the wall that has the glow shard. During the tutorial, you can insist that Rouxls teaches you how to use items. All he has to say is, you use them and something happens. Is that sufficient? That's all he has to say about items. Only Rouxls can actually use the glow shard, but when he does, nothing happens. There's kind of this interesting little dynamic of that not coming together how he explained. The glow shard is kind of confusing because there is a way to actually use it. Now, as far as I've found, the only time you can actually do anything with the glow shard is using it against these rudens. Rouxls used the glow shard, Ruden became enraptured. Both of them there, and the glow shard disappeared. Here I am rudely attacking them, but they can now be spared immediately. But for whatever reason, that is the only thing you can do with that item. Another item that doesn't really appear to have a lot of use is the manual. You can use it against certain enemies and they get bored and fall asleep, but the main use seems to be against this Clover mini-boss. Clover grew close. Chris reads the manual. Clover became sentimental. Aw, he made that so caring. Isn't it a bit boring? It's so cute. I want it. That dialogue all makes sense in the current context of the game, but it makes even more sense when you know that in the game files, you could originally open up the manual and flip through it. Here are some of the pages from that manual. You can see it's very homemade. It is quite adorable. And so you can imagine that that specific bit of dialogue, while still making sense now, would have even more to it if viewing the manual did still exist in the game. Whenever you use the glow shard, it does say, but nothing happened. This could maybe be a reference to Ness in Earthbound using the credit card and nothing happens. Or possibly even Magikarp using Splash and nothing happens. Doesn't necessarily have to be a reference, but it's at least similar. There is a series of Japanese bullet hell games known as Touhou that Toby was obviously very influenced by. Apparently long before the days of Undertale, Toby kind of had a breakout in that community because a lot of the music that he wrote naturally sounded like music from those games. So I've been told that specifically the song Field of Hopes and Dreams is apparently very Touhou-like in both sound and name. And even when you first walk into the area, the way that the song name scrolls onto the screen feels like it was lifted right from those games. So there's obviously some deep inspirations there. Thank you to Maria for laying that one out for me. Not so much Easter eggs or secrets, but there's a lot of goofy ways you can mess around with this puzzle. Since neither of these two will help, you just have to push the boxes onto the buttons. If you push a box on and back off, Chris, I don't think that's... great job, Chris, I think you're on to something. If you push a box on, and then you yourself take the place of the second box. Chris, you can't solve it by stepping on the switch. You aren't a box. Chris, don't listen to him. You can be a box. I was a box for Halloween once. Just a box? Well, it's not like I can dress up as a goddamn monster. That's the end of that. It's just funny stuff to mess around with. Interesting little bit about Chris's equipment. He starts with the wood blade, a wooden practice blade with a carbon reinforced core. When you're in the above world, Chris walks around holding a pencil. So a carbon reinforced core is like the graphite on the inside of a pencil. But you can also purchase the spooky sword, a black and orange sword with a bat hilt, much cooler. But at the end of the game, it actually affects what your overworld item is. Now you can see Chris is no longer carrying the pencil as a weapon, he instead has Halloween pencil because of the spooky sword. These doors are pretty interesting. They start out as just these empty frames, but eventually when these doors start becoming usable, they start to have a glowing flame underneath the door and look oddly similar to the door to Sans' room in Undertale. Now this goes into some big new theory now that Sans is the only one who exists across these two universes, and he uses these doors to teleport all over the place across time and space. Pretty cool little tie-in there. Kind of an interesting little thing, when they fix the teleportation door, the horse now appears in front of us, even though we just saw him a few screens before. You go back, he's not here anymore, so I guess the implication there is that he teleported there ahead of you. When you go to the Smith Malleus, he can fix all sorts of things, one of which is the broken piece of cake that we got much earlier. It is now the top cake. Top cake itself is a pretty strong item, heals 160 HP to the whole team. But that door to the field is now available and we can backtrack a little bit. It's a bit of a walk back, but you can take it all the way back to the top chef instead of using it at the end battle or wherever you choose. My friend, share my riches, I have many worse cakes I do not want. If you're not carrying a cake, come here and I'll give you one, forever. You traded the top cake for the spin cake. Now I'm gonna continue to spin and cry, spin and cry. So it's only half as good as the top cake is, but if you ever use it, you can just come back to Top Chef and he'll give you another one. At this stage, when we see Susie and Lancer just chilling out in their beach chairs, it would be strange to say that that's any sort of reference. But the chairs themselves and their very relaxed arms up poses are pretty well completely identical to an old video from the Kickstarter of the original Undertale. Papyrus is there rambling, explaining the different reward tiers for the Kickstarter, and Sans is just there kicking back, relaxing in his chair. Maybe you would think that's just how Toby or Temmie happens to draw lawn chairs, but the fact that it's so exactly the same makes me think it had to be on purpose. When you first talk to these Rudens, when they're fanning Susie and Lancer, they talk a lot about how they don't want to be here and they feel kind of forced. But when you come back to them later on, I thought I hated fanning leaves, but I got really into it. Swish, swish, I could do this forever. Swish, swish, oh, fanning? I'm not fanning. This is a weighted leaf. I'm just building up my muscles. Ugh, I'm so jealous of everyone with a leaf. For whatever reason, when Rouxls down in battle, he turns into this weird pile. He just kind of disappears altogether and only the clothes are remaining. This is either a reference to Final Fantasy's Black Mage, or maybe even the Jedi from Star Wars. I just love this little face when Rouxls doesn't really know what's going on. It comes up a couple times in the game, but it just reverts to this goofy MS Paint sad drawing of his face. When you're running around in this area with the paper cutout characters, you can actually click around and interact with the little sparkles, fireflies, whatever you want to call them. You get all sorts of different kinds of tones coming up. This mysterious fellow that you encounter in the forest is in fact Lancer in disguise. Nigh unrecognizable, but it is in fact him. That's kind of a hidden in plain sight type secret. When you're building the Thrash machine, you're choosing the shoes. One of the options is attractive wheels leading the way. Another way of saying attractive is that something is hot. I thought that was pretty great. But if you build a machine that completely maximizes hotness, hey, why'd you draw something like, it looks like you guys want to kiss? It's okay to express yourself, Chris. Anyway, great job, Lancer. Seems like maybe Susie's projecting there a wee little bit. God, it's so hot. Oh, that's not good, actually. It's got like flat tires and a stupid face scribbled on it. We can see Rouxls' scribble face at the same time. This one just makes me laugh, so I wanted to show it off. When you go to end your machine, it normally says, this is your machine, is that okay? If you make him all duck, your machine sucks ass. Is that okay? It's nice Susie finally found a place she fits in. That's so sad. If after Susie joins the party for real, you choose to come all the way back to where she first burst out of the bush here. Hey, you two didn't mess with my hideout, did ya? I wonder if hideout might be overselling it a bit. Nah, I took a nap in there, so it's basically my house now. Now, normally when you get the white ribbon, Rouxls says that it would look great on you, and you decide to give it to him instead. He asks whether or not you think it looks okay. And you can wait till Susie's on the team to acquire it and give it to Rouxls. Chris, you're giving it to me? Do I look pretty, Susie? Leave me out of this. You didn't answer the question. How am I supposed to know? Leave me alone! If you're goofing around with the debug mode or editing game files and teleport yourself around within the game, you can actually make it later in the game before the segment where you would have named your team. When you use a save point in the great board after that, you get the message, the power of failing to name your team shines within you. Something really weird that happens at the bake sale here. Things are listed as costing gold, which of course was the currency in Undertale. Same thing with Hathy's Donuts. It feels like maybe it was just an oversight, maybe a little bit of a slip up. I suppose even Toby isn't 100% infallible. The Hearts Donut at the shop is also likely a little joke on the gag of Hertz Donut. Of note in Sham's shop is this little doll in the corner just to the left of his head there. This is actually a Temmie-chan doll. There's the Temmies in the Undertale universe. Temmie-chan herself actually worked as an artist on Undertale, and so putting that on the shelf there is just kind of her putting in a little reference to herself. If you decide to check Susie during this fight, it gives you the basic stats. If you read the status screen, you already knew that though. Now normally whenever you die, you get this death screen and it goes through all this different text and things like that. If you lose to Susie and Lancer, it skips all that because you don't actually die, they're just kind of chasing you away. It plops you back on the screen before the battle and you can come right back for a rematch, but the dialogue is a little bit different. Is that what I think it is? Yes, it was. They blow it up yet again. Why did you build another one just to blow it up? It's funny. Well, in any case, you defeated us. I suppose we can become bad guys now. Hey, not so fast. It's really boring if you just give up. The least you can do is show some resistance. Yeah, looks like we gotta teach you a lesson. You're gonna thrash us again? Seems like it. Then you immediately dive into a follow-up battle, and you can intentionally lose it again, but this is the last time you'll get any new dialogue. Just a ... How many of these do they have? And blown up again. Please just let us be bad guys. No, not until you stop wanting to. Fine, we don't want to be bad guys. Hear that, Susie? Sounds like we'll have to make you be one then. That's completely unnecessary. I like the sound of that. And if you lose any more after that, you're just going to see that third one play out over and over again. One thing that I absolutely love in the game, and something I love in real life, is names that biologists end up giving to groupings of animals. Ones that people commonly know, a flock of crows is called a murder. A grouping of eagles is called a convocation. A group of foxes could be called a skulk. There's like an absurd amount of these in real life, so I really love that Toby included that in the game. You can have a board of jigsaws. I think the only other instance of this is you can run into a necklace of rudens. For whatever reason, only the two different enemy types received these grouping terms. If you run into this grouping of 3 unique enemies, it's a smorgasbord. Spelt slightly differently here for a pun about the Great Board, which we use to typically refer to just big feasts. Apparently the literal Swedish translation is table of sandwiches. Doesn't really apply, just kinda neat. By flipping around wildly in the stats menu, you can change some of the details about these characters. Rouxls' kindness sometimes becomes dogness, and is just set to a value of 1. And now and again, for Chris, you just get a stat that is dog, and you just get a silly sleeping dog there. Just a random thing that happens. The only way to make it appear is just flip back and forth, and eventually it shows up. Hey kid, you want to buy a tutorial? There's a handful of alternate dialogue takes you can get with these puzzle makers turned tutorial masters. First they try to negotiate how much it'll cost. You can just repeatedly say no, you don't want it. And if you say no to everything, Rouxls steps in. Excuse me sir, I think I have $1. Is it dark? Yes? Oh, perfect. Right this way, gentleners. If you go through the whole rigmarole but don't have enough money, just hand over the money and... You don't have enough money? Jumping jigsaws, you're just like us. And people like us gotta help each other out. Come this way. If you do it when you're stone broke... Only $1, please, oh please, I need this right now. Finally. Just hand over the money and... You don't have $1? Jumping jigsaws, you're just like us, and people like us gotta help each other out. Come this way, same basic thing. Donation hole. If you like our tutorials, please throw your money into a hole. Throw $1 in, you don't have enough money. You failed to budget enough money to throw into a hole. Off to the side here next to Sham's shop is a few of these tutorial masters. There's the Susie master where you can ask her about Susie. Talks about Susie's always attacking. She'll smash them with a crushing chop. She strikes and does all that stuff, and Susie kind of seems a little bit pleased about all of this. If you look at her stats here, her rudeness is at 100, her crudeness is at 100. Now we got Susie's rudeness down to 99. She's a slightly nicer person, and you can come back to the Susie master and he'll have different dialogue to say. Warning, the days of warning have long since passed. The circumstances changed pretty fast. A fact, Susie seems to have changed just a hair. That kind of growth is actually rare. And attack, Susie's Buster, rude as may be, will deal more damage if you just press Z. Just a fun little bit to reflect the fact that her character has grown. This first battle with the C round is supposed to teach you about acting with Susie, but if you already know it, you can lay down a warning, and the C round actually bails on the fight. You don't have to fight it at all. If you check C round in the first battle that you encounter it, C round, attack 1, defense 0. Despite appearances, it's trying its best to defeat you. A pretty subtle, easy to miss detail. It might be very obvious, but I somehow didn't think it through. In checkers, your piece is crowned by reaching the opposite end of the board. This little checker piece literally walks to the end of the board before he receives the crown. It even flashes the board to draw attention to it, but somehow I didn't make the connection, so maybe other people missed it too. If you choose to check the K round the first time you come to battle it, attack 9, defense 3, check. That's chess, not checkers. There is such a weird amount of layers to this joke. First of all, the other enemies you're encountering on the board are chess pieces, not checkers. You can check or checkmate someone in chess. K-round is a checker. I mean, both games use essentially the same board, but when you start throwing it all together like this, I don't even know what's real anymore. And now when you go to check the K-round, it comes up as checkers. But now when you go to checkers it says, that's better. Just making sure you're getting the two games straight. And in the second time that you fight the K round, it is still checkers. But there's no funny dialogue when you actually use the checkers. It's interesting that Susie and Rouxls' designs both have hearts directly in the center of them. Chris doesn't actually have anything there, although in the various puzzles throughout the game where it zooms into your soul and you have to dodge between things, it highlights your soul then by kind of doing this transparency thing with yourself. So all three characters do technically have hearts in their center. What that has to say about their souls, there's a lot you could probably read into that. In this section here where you get chased by this damned bird, try not to die. I'm not doing it very effectively. At the very end there, you ring the bell. And then you see that his face kind of like runs away there, which is kind of strange. It stood out to me in my original playthrough, but I didn't think to go back for it. Then if you go back to the start here, his beak has run back to the opening thing here. You talk to him, these birds are pissing me off. I'm the original Star Walker, and for whatever reason there's that weird space in between. And even stranger is the fact that pissing is capitalized and made yellow like that. There's no real apparent reason for that. Now this Star Walker isn't hidden in this area where there's all the cages and things in the prison. There's another Star Walker just chilling in the corner here. This jail is pissing me off. I'm the original Star Walker. He has essentially the same dialogue. No idea what the purpose of this character is. Totally unclear if this is the same one we saw earlier or if there's two of them and they're arguing about which is the original. It's weird. Now, going about it right to left, when the beak jumps off the bird's face and you run back across, you can actually catch up to him and have both of them on the screen at the same time. But his dialogue is still the same. The birds are pissing me off. I'm the original Star Walker. Someone actually went into the game's files, and the little sprite for the thing that runs off of the bird's face is also called Star Walker. Now this took me way too many damn tries, but if you do this whole chase in this direction, then you can run after the face. If you don't touch the walls at all because they slow you down, you can catch up to him and quickly interact with it. You got $40 from Star Walker's ambient luster. So this bird face is 100% these Star Walker things, but there do appear to be many of them, all claiming to be originals. Who the hell knows? What's most likely with the Star Walker character is that this is the original sprite for what eventually becomes the Star Walker bird face. Both sprites are called Star Walker in the original game files, but some people have come up with some interesting theories about why this guy talks about being the original Star Walker, other than just possibly being the starter sprite. Obviously, the name Star Walker is immediately going to make people think of Luke Skywalker. There is a weird theory in Star Wars, a weird deep down fan theory. Some people actually think that there are two Luke Skywalkers, a Luke Prime and then the second one. This has to do with Luke looking like he's very different heights at different parts in the movie. These two Star Walkers are quite a bit different in size. It's the most obscure thing and most ridiculous fan theory of all time, so it makes me think that it probably isn't a reference. It's probably just a joke about the old programmer art that was placeholding. But others have pointed out that this Star Walker looks an awful lot like the Star Man from Earthbound. Possibly another reference in there. Like, I would say that that one is actually likely, and the Skywalker one is a little insane. But who am I to say for certain? So at the end of the area with the bird, you enter this separate area. If you just kind of spastically go back and forth between them, eventually you find this hidden area of this lone tree. He is behind the tree. You wrap yourself around the tree, start talking. Well, there's a man here. He offered you something. Yes, you received an egg.
Can I offer you a nice egg in this trying time?
Well, there's not a man here. He left. Now it's just a regular old tree with nothing behind it. The egg now sits in your key item inventory. Not too important. Not too unimportant. And then when you leave, it spits you back out by the bake sale here. But there is also another egg existing in the overworld. Comes up very early on in the game. Sadly, seems like it already has a partner. This is, of course, a callback to the hard-boiled egg that Temmie was looking after in Undertale. Kind of sad that they're still investing time in looking after this egg. It's funny that they specify that the egg is black and white here, because originally in Undertale, it was a decorated, painted-up egg. The hard-boiled egg emanates a feeling of pity towards you, so somehow this egg does seem to be somewhat sentient, which makes it a little less sad. Perhaps it's noteworthy that the egg is specifically labeled as black and white rather than simply white. Either it's a joke that these characters actually see that chunky black outline, or perhaps something more. Something else black and white? If you try to use your cell phone at any point, it doesn't really go through, and you start getting these noises that sound just like Gaster from Undertale. So that's just kind of spooky, I guess. There's a man here. He offered you something. We didn't actually say no. Then, he needn't be here. You try again? There is not a man here. Another weird thing is that there aren't actually any boundaries in this. You can totally just walk outside of everything. I mean, there are larger boundaries outside of all of that, but it is a little strange that it kind of outlines it like that for you. A common thing people ask to do is to try to use the cell phone here, both in the regular standard area and in the weird outer area here, and it just does the same thing either way. It is the usual Gaster call. I would love to go back after this and see what actually happens if you follow up on it, but I don't think the game actually lets you go back. I've been trying for quite some time at this point, and I'm very sick of it. It's a shame you guys don't make it any further, because my guys are about to smash you into blood. Lots of blood. Splooshing blood. Very gross and bad. So bad that it's gonna need a bucket. What the hell is up with the bucket, though? It's to put the blood in. Yeah, I'm not supposed to make a mess. This is one I wouldn't have known without your guys' comments, so again, thank you. Turns out Toby Fox has actually made music for Homestuck. I don't know anything about that world except for the limited amounts that people have told me, but there's kind of like a weird little PG version of reproducing in that world that involves buckets. I don't really understand how things work in that world, but it wouldn't be such a stretch to think that Toby put this on here as a little tribute to Homestuck and a reference to his contributions to that webcomic. This little bit of dialogue about inviting the guard to visit the trash can is a callback to a line Papyrus had back in Undertale. Once you leave the castle past this door, come all the way back to this little area here, which I think you can access earlier, but I forgot to go check it out. There is a weird hitbox thing going on here where you can actually walk beyond that. And you can just keep walking out of the game, as far as I can tell, indefinitely. But if you go up a little bit, you can get outside of that even. And you start running into the walls that are creating the borders inside. But yeah, you can run around up in there a little bit. And you don't walk across the area to trigger to go to the next area. So you can just end up getting lost up here. Same thing, you can come at it from the bottom as well. And just kind of a funny way you can mess around with the game a little bit is by walking up into the thing that's supposed to signify that you're moving on to the next area there. So you just kind of wig the game out a little bit and you just go a direction you wouldn't expect. If you intentionally lose the battle that takes place in the next screen against Lancer and Susie, come back here, walk off screen, and bust out the cell phone, which normally, without losing that battle, would make the normal Gaster sound effects. You tried to call on the cell phone, and then before it has a chance for anything to take place, it crashes the game. I guess I'm leaving all this in the video for posterity's sake more than anything else. As it has totally been confirmed to be a bug, it was eventually patched out entirely. So yeah, there was never anything to read into any of the specific interactions that happened here. None of it is supposed to be there. Now, this is more of just a joke again, but it's one I didn't get immediately because I kept reading this guy's name as Rouxls Kaard. You eventually get the item that's Rouxls Rue. R-O-U-X is a real word, it's pronounced Rue, which means the master of puzzles in the same theme as spades, clubs, diamonds, all that, is Rouxls Kaard. It went way over my head. It's my favorite joke in the game, though, once someone finally pointed it out to me, and I just loved it enough that I wanted to share it. When he presents his puzzle, if you talk to him instead, he says, lost, frightened, confused, good, hahaha. This is super obscure, but it's actually a reference to a bit of dialogue from a game called I Am Mean.
Lost, frightened, confused, good!
There's a worm up here, and he lives a wormy life. I'm mostly kidding, this isn't a secret or anything, I just don't know what the point of this character is. I think it's just there just for kicks. Before the king came along, I used to eat the leaves from this tree, now I still do that. Such is the way of the worm. Someone commented with the theory that maybe this is kind of a bit of meta commentary on the game, like nothing you do matters. There's also a recurring thing where Rouxls Kaard continually calls you worms. It comes up many times in all of his dialogue trees. So I don't know, maybe that does tie into to the worm from earlier in the forest. We're worms, things just don't affect us. But since some of his dialogue is already a direct reference to I Am Mean, there's also a chance that this is just referencing the fact that that character always used to call the player bookworm. Now, I haven't talked about this little pink ball guy or the coat rack at all. What could be going on here is when the two of them are together, they do actually look like the different components from a game of jacks. But later this character is directly referred to as a coat hanger. So what might be going on here is that this little pink ball is actually a reference to the bully's friend from Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. About halfway through that game, you actually do go to a dark world that's just a dark version of the light world. And that's where you find the bully's friend, who is just a tiny little pink orb of a character. It doesn't seem that absurd of a possibility, because this character is just kinda nothing otherwise. Someone even suggested that it would complete the pattern of this caterpillar. White, green, pink, white, green, pink. It's kind of a random thought, and I'm not sure if any other dialogue really supports that, but maybe. This character doesn't really do much, does it? When you're guiding Susie through this puzzle, if you try to start the puzzle with a swap, Susie mocks this choice. Nice first move, Chris. If you spam a single option, Chris, are you sure you know what you're doing? Spam a single option again. Enough resets. I'm doing the puzzle myself. Okay, I won't, but if you get one suit wrong before the swap, yeah, we solved it. What the hell? We were so close. Let us through anyway. Do that once more. Finally, we solved it. Damn it, wait. We just did the same thing as last time. When you're down in the prison on the far left here, there's a cell with the set of eyes, and when you investigate them, yeah, even I got arrested, and I'm just a pair of eyes. What's the world coming to? This is a really far reach because there's nothing else indicating this, but someone did pitch the theory that maybe these are Sham's eyes. I thought that was at the very least a creative idea. Even though it's probably not true, it probably is just there for the sake of a joke. It is kind of a neat thought. When you rummage around in the room, in one of the holes you can find 20 rupees. Unfortunately, that's not a useful currency here. Definitely just a reference to rupees from The Legend of Zelda, even though it is spelt differently. It's not even spelt the same as Indian rupees. Now this one isn't really a reference or anything, it's just a very funny joke that I appreciate. It's some kind of digging implement. Now obviously the joke is that Lancer is like the Prince of Spades, you're in this spade wing, there's spade everything all over the place, yet for some reason you can't decipher what this is. That might be up there with one of my favorite jokes in the game. When you take on Rouxls' second puzzle, he mentions that maybe he has a better puzzle waiting. Rouxls chimes in. Can we see it? No. Maybe sounds a little familiar.
Good Lord, what is happening in there?
Aurora Borealis?
Aurora Borealis. At this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the country, localized entirely within your kitchen.
Yes.
That's it?
No.
There's a couple of fun ways that Toby might have been playing around with language for characters' names. Someone in the comments pointed out that K-A-A-R-T, not D, is actually Dutch for card, or even literally as playing card. So obviously Toby wanted us to pronounce it as card, but he didn't want it to immediately look exactly like card. Maybe he took a little bit of influence from the Netherlands there. There's also the Hathis, the heart-themed enemies that we encounter. In the Malay language, when you pronounce what is written as Hathi in English, it will come out very similar to Hati, which actually just means heart. Reuben actually means ruby in many different languages. There is Croatian, German, Dutch, Swedish, and I think several others. I'd been looking for ways to tie it to diamond, but that makes sense. Not every culture and language actually calls it diamonds, hearts, and so on. Some of the translations are ruby or red gem or things along those lines for cards. In Danish it's called a rood or a rooter, while rubies themselves are called rubens. Rood actually means window or window pane, and ruden means ruby. So there's all sorts of languages that might have originally stemmed from. Treating it like diamond was looking in the wrong place. The Rudens actually say shine, shine when they attack you, which makes sense because of sparkling gemstones. But with that exact same spelling, shine, which I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of, is actually die in Japanese. So that one kind of works on 2 layers, which is very impressive. In the Hearts room here with the Hathis and the 4 different beds, you can see when you look at the different characters, they have unique classes. We have Chris the leader, Susie the Dark Knight, and Rouxls the Prickly Prince. If you inspect all the beds, looks like a bed? Will you rest here? No, you won't. It's not your bed. If you inspect all 4 beds, you've thoroughly investigated. Your rank was upgraded to Bed Inspector. So if you go back there, you're now no longer leader, you're now Bed Inspector. This is a bit of a weird one, but it comes up the second time you fight this little doggo checker guy with the little crown on his head. If you chase after it immediately after the battle, you can watch it sliding away, and if you catch up, you can interact with it. There she blows. It's going off to live a better life now. The manual that Rouxls gives you, the handmade book full of various tips and tricks, you can choose to throw it on the ground. Yes, confirm. You drop the manual on the floor with a resounding thud. Hey Chris, what are you doing? Oh no, is that the manual? Looks like you accidentally dropped it. Here you go, Chris. You don't want to lose that. You got the manual, again. But if you want to be real heartless, you can go back and throw it on the floor a second time. You toss the manual hard. Its pages scatter in the wind. That's okay, Chris. I'll just make a better one next time. Poor Rouxls. One thing I want to mess around with is once Lancer bails, then Susie chases after, and Rouxls chases after Susie, you're left on your own? And so what if I take this opportunity to throw this manual away? Now I feel sad. It was just thrown away like nothing. Usually Rouxls steps in and stops you from throwing it away. Nope, now I just ditched it. Just rudely threw it away when no one was looking. Towards the end of the game, Susie finally pushes her hair out of her eyes. This also affects her little portrait picture, in which we can now see her eyes. In this land, only eyes blinded by darkness can see the way. And so what can obviously be read into this is that most characters' eyes are obscured for the entire game. But at various times we do get to see every character's eyes. With Chris, we don't actually see his eyes until the very, very end, and it's when he's alone, and it's quite sinister. So this line that originally seems like it just ties directly to the eye puzzle that takes place next to it about blinding the eyes, seeing the way, all that. There could be a lot more to that line than I originally thought. I need to take this opportunity to dispel something that I see come up in Deltarune comments all the time. People say that you can see a hint of Chris's red eye while either walking around or during this falling animation. I can show you a zoomed in version of the sprite. There is no red. What's happening here is that the compression in the game causes a blending of these two colors, the brown and the yellow, right next to each other. Even that doesn't quite create a red, but if your eyes are out of focus, depending on your screen settings, maybe it's something you're already looking for, then yes, you might have a little bit of an optical illusion where you think you see a hint of red. I'm not telling you you're not seeing it, I'm just telling you that it's not a part of the sprite. We can't say whether or not Toby planned that. My guess is no, but the fact that it ends up fitting with the larger game is kind of a neat coincidence. So no, there is no red in Chris's eye, but yes, I believe you when you say you see it. Now just beyond the great door here, there is a save spot. The first time you hit it up, it says, "With the door closed behind you, your adventure will begin. The power of adventure shines within you." If you wait till you get all the way to the end here, right before taking on the boss fight with the Chaos King, and then do some big time backtracking, and I mean big time, all the way back to the very start of all of this. You can go all the way back to the save point in front of the door here. The door is still closed. The power of backtracking shines within you. So you can't actually go back through the door or anything like that, but it's just a funny little bit of text to say, hey, thanks for giving it a try. There's so much great dialogue to be found through backtracking. Lots of it becomes available once Susie joins the party for real. You can go and find the last standing Jigsaw from when Susie went on a beating up rampage. It's that purple beast. Whoa, nice cheer. Look, Chris, I've got fans. Okay, I'm out of breath. You can go back to the cake chef, whose cake that Susie ate. Mama Meeba, Mama Meeba, you're the beast that ate my cake. Yeah, so? Want me to spit it back out? No, that's quite fine. Sure, it wasn't that good. It'd probably improve it. By the way, Mama Meeba is genius. And you can follow up on that little bit of dialogue. Why are you looking at me like that? I don't trust anyone that won't eat my spit. So you don't trust anyone? Yeah. A little bit sad that it implies that Susie still has trust issues. You can run back to the room where you hollered instructions at Susie. Susie's first solo puzzle. What a nice memory. Stop remembering me fondly. But this one only just says solved puzzle. If you come to the two areas where Rouxls had laid out his block pushing puzzles, there'll now be these fanboy runes hanging around. Sigh, Rouxls Kaard was standing here. I think making block pushing puzzles is a totally hunky hobby. And at the other spot, sigh, Rouxls Kaard was standing here. Sorry I'm sighing, I didn't get much sleep. There is a special bit of text when you die. It appears you have reached an end. Notably, not the end. Either that's implying we'll eventually see multiple endings in the full game, or even if there were just one singular ending, yeah, death is an end. When the game asks if you want to try again, if you say no, then the world was covered in darkness. it takes you to this blank screen where you can't do anything, and it's the only place in the game you can hear an exclusive song called Darkness Falls. If you just leave the game open, let that song play out, takes maybe about a minute, the game will close itself. Then you can open the game back up and simply return to your save file. And we can start assembling the 3 pieces of the key that'll allow us to access a secret boss at the end of the game. The first of which, when you get into the elevator here, you can go back to the prison floor or the regular floor, or there's the question mark thing that, I don't know, moves Willy Wonka Chocolate Factory laterally across to this room with the staircase, where you get to talk to the strange prisoner here at the bottom of the stairs. Once you've completed chatting with the strange prisoner, then you can actually go back to that first shop. Now there's a new dialogue option there where you can talk to him about the strange prisoner. Through that you can get access to Broken Key A. So in this area with the dancing, spinning paper cutout people, there is a secret little hidden path here. It's identifiable by this black bar that is obscuring any of the stars falling outside of the regular map. Earlier in the game you're given a little bit of a hint that this is something you can look for. If you go down through there's this alternate path. You hook around here past the rabbit guy, and then you can get the Broken Key B. Pretty early on in things, once you solve this puzzle here, past this guy, going up to the top. In this little puzzle where you go to get one of the broken key pieces, you're supposed to have gone to the castle first so you know the order that these are meant to be in. From the bottom, the order of our rooms in Kaard Castle. Of course, if you haven't been there, you won't know it. You can reread the sign, really emphasizing that it's impossible if you haven't been there. But if you actually solve the puzzle without having gone to the castle, because you've already done the game, you know it, or you just do enough random guesses that you eventually get it. Diamond Heart Club Spade opens things up for you, and you open the treasure chest and you get the Broken Key C. Way to stick it to that sign. You aren't the boss of me, sign. Once you have all 3 of these key pieces, you can take them to Malleus and you can forge them into one complete key. Taking the key back to the strange prisoner, presenting it to the door, allows you to access the hardest fight in the game against Jevil, a Joker-like character who is just incredibly difficult to beat. So you can't actually do a genocide run in this game. Anytime you try to fight anything, it just runs away once it gets to low health. Even if you pacify versus fighting the king, either way he falls to his knees exhausted and tricks Rouxls into healing him. Depending on which route you went, there's a little cutscene that plays out slightly differently, but it all plays out largely the same. So while the king battle kind of bends the rule, I think the Jevil battle is the only one with 2 distinctly different outcomes. Should you choose to pacify Jevil, it plays out like this. What fun! I'm exhausted. You kids tired me up. Now I will sleep for the other 100 years. Unfortunately, you kids cannot have such a pleasant dream. From now a nightmare will awaken in your hearts, in the shadow of the night's hand. Lighteners, can you stop it? Either way, a mischief, a chaos. Lighteners, from inside your little cell, take this and do your strongest. And then he gives you the Jevil's tail that's added to your armors. You can go and equip it. A J-shaped tail that gives you devil energy. If instead you choose to fight Jevil and ride that battle out to the bitter end, the dialogue is a little bit different. Ha ha ha, what fun! You're fast, strong, but there are yet faster, yet stronger. The hand of the night is drifting forward. Soon, the queen returns and hell's roar bubbles from the depths. Lighteners, can you stop it? Either way, a mischief, a chaos. Lighteners, from inside your little cell, take me and do your strongest. And in this time he gives you the Devil's Sword. The inventory text for this reads, a skull emblazoned scythe axe. Reduces Rude Buster's cost by 10. Now both the knife and tail cannot be sold, and shopkeepers will treat them as if they're empty inventory slots if you try. A lot of people inevitably asked what happens if you take the Devil's items up with you. You actually can't equip the Devil's knife to Chris because it is an axe weapon, and so there's nothing to change there. And if you equip the Devil's tail as a piece of armor, it still just remains as a bandage either way. One particular thing of note during this Jevil battle, he has this carousel attack where all these horses run by and they're impossible, they're so hard. But sometimes they appear as ducks instead, and very, very rarely one of those ducks will have the Everyman's head. Everyman was part of an attack that the Reaper bird used in Undertale. This Everyman also appears in some graffiti in the Overworld. Also an Ice E, if anyone's wondering what the other one is. You can see the Ice E again here on the Pizza sign. It also looks very much the same as it did on Papyrus's crossword puzzle in Undertale. I believe Jevil is the only character in Deltarune who actually speaks. He has a few different lines. He says, "I can do anything," "chaos, chaos," "metamorphosis."
Metamorphosis. I can do anything.
Now, out of one of the most obscure references that there is in this game, some of these lines come from Loose Clown, a line sticker set. Of all the things to reference, I don't know why this, but thank you to the people who pointed that out. That is interesting to say the least. And if anyone's curious, since the Jevil is the only character in the game that actually has voice acting, normally it's chaos, chaos, metamorphosis, and I can do anything.
I can do anything. Chaos, chaos, metamorphosis. Bye-bye. The true and real chaos.
If you play the Japanese version of the game, here are some of the Japanese lines. Maybe people can let us know if those translate well or not. Interestingly, it advertises the pirouette as being random chaos, yet there is a very specific order to which everything happens, and it repeats the pattern. On the fourth time you use the pirouette against the Jevil, a useless bird flies by for some random ass reason. If you go and talk to Sham after the end of the Jevil battle, he has a lot to say, but I specifically want to focus on his use of the line, "dark, darker yet darker," because that is specifically a line out of the Gaster entry 17. These connections just keep growing and growing. Now, even though the end game overworld section is quite short, it does have a very dense amount of references and Easter eggs and such. Now, there's quite a lot going on in this room. A lot of it is kind of on-the-nose stuff. The different colored carpet here is the field and the forest. Then there's the great board that you go through, the different cards going up the shelf, like the castle towers. There's even a little toy doll here who's supposed to be the shopkeeper. So all of that is pretty expected and straightforward stuff. One thing that's extra funny is there's this tiny little red piece on the edge of the board here, and that probably is the K round. The first time that you actually fight this thing, his name is C Round. So you can either call him C Round or K Round when he gets finally crowned. So that could stand for King Round, but if you say it together, his name is just Crowned. Kind of a full circle thing there, I guess. I've heard people talk about this weird opening area, how eventually when you start entering the field and the forest and the great board and all that, it's reflected in the overworld inside of the empty classroom. But this opening area isn't really in there at all. There's nothing representing it. So people have kind of said that maybe this great door is analogous to the door that you enter the closet through. There's not a lot to support that. It's kind of interesting, but it does kind of make sense layout-wise, but it does beg the question, does this opening area connect to anything? All the cliffs with the weird oozing eyeballs, the area with Rouxls castle, all the weird arrow-shaped houses and stuff, like does that match anything in the school or in the town? I don't think so. So all of that early game stuff before the Great Door must exist before this closet door. It's pretty far-reaching, but I think it's the only conclusion you can draw there. This one is kind of ridiculous, and I don't know if it's totally intentional, but this picture on the wall looks like bold and brash. If you inspect the picture, it says it's a yellowed, poorly drawn picture of a green turtle, and it's signed Alvin. We know that Father Alvin is a character in this overworld. It seems unlikely that they were drawing themselves in a self-portrait this much later in life. There's a theory that this is a drawing they made as a kid. Maybe this classroom has been unused in all that time? There's some interesting theories there. Maybe Alvin will become a more important character in the full game. This has been brought up a couple of times, but just next to the church here, before the graveyard, there is something on the ground here. You can't interact with it, just that weird black spot above the tree there. I think it is just a graphical glitch. Same as that annoying lone pixel during the king fight. Yeah, I honestly don't believe there's anything to be read into there. Still carrying the egg, which is super strange. If you try to drop it, it says, "What egg?" and now the egg is just gone. This is probably a reference to What Pumpkin, a common thing used by MS Paint Adventures creator Andrew Hussey. I think the idea behind that joke is that by acknowledging these pumpkins, they no longer exist. Same as I mentioned before, it makes sense that Toby would include this sort of stuff since he worked on a lot of music for Homestuck in the past. Another fairly clever question that someone had is what happens if you call Toriel when you first get back before she has a chance to call you in the hallway? Ring ring. Chris, I'm grading papers. I can talk to you when you get back, alright? Our house is only at the top of town, you know. Click. So she doesn't seem nearly as concerned, and the funny thing is that you don't get the dialogue of her calling you in the hall if you do this. Guess she's satisfied with that as checking in, even though you've been gone all day. There's the ball of junk, which is basically all the stuff you accumulated down in the dark world. You can drop that as well. You really didn't want to throw it away. Throw it away anyways? Yes. Handshaking, you dropped the ball of junk on the ground. It broke into pieces. You felt bitter. So basically you just threw away everything that you just did in the dark world, and now there's no more items left to collect. There's a box full of scented markers that you can choose to sniff. You dig out the marshmallow one and start huffing it, which I thought was kind of interesting, seeing as the dark candy that you can find down below smells like marshmallows. If you still have those dark candies in your inventory up until the overworld, your ball of junk will also smell like marshmallows. So I thought something that would be worth testing before going back to the outer world is to eat up the marshmallow scented candies. If you then inspect the ball of junk, a small ball of accumulated things, and that's it. No remaining scent. I was curious if it would smell like something else. It just becomes nothing. But that does prove that the scent only exists if you're still carrying dark candies. This is just kind of a funny bit of dialogue if you interact with the lockers over and over again. The locker is locked. The locker's lock is locked. The lock's locker is locked. The locker's lock's locker is locked. It just cycles through again. It's just kind of a funny interaction. There's a couple of dumb little jokes that play out with this water fountain. You can go to it early on in the game and drink from the water fountain. Susie calls you out on that as she impatiently waits. People put their mouth on that, you know. Which I think is probably a reference to Parks and Rec.
Andy is our official water fountain tester.
All right, let's give this sucker a test drive.
A really weird, stupid running joke in that show that this is how people drink out of the water fountain. And you can actually revisit the fountain at the end of the game. You can actually run the water fountain many times. You ran the water fountain, it's lukewarm. On the second time, it's tepid. On the third, it's refreshingly cool. In case at some point you felt that Chris might need a nice refreshing beverage. I personally love ice cold water, so it just brings me joy. Using the debug mode, which by the way is something I'm using every time you see this red frame counter in the top left corner and why sometimes you see a red box flash over Chris. It's also something you kind of have to break the game files apart to access. It's not intended for your everyday use. But through that I can quickly save and load, and I use that over and over to repeatedly discard items. Through that you can see they have randomized bits of flavor text for this, just like discarding items in Undertale did. You put the hot chocolate on the ground and gave it a little pat. You bid a quiet farewell to the bouquet. You abandoned the bouquet. You threw the hot chocolate on the ground like the piece of trash that it is. Majority of the time you just get X item is thrown away, but it does appear to be totally randomized. There's no extra bit of conditions that need to be met, or no real emotion or intention to be read into those words. So hopefully that kind of clears things up with the tossing of items. Alternately, you can drink the hot chocolate, it tasted wonderful, your throat tightened. probably sad about memories of Asriel. Same as in Undertale, it's still library rather than just a library. You can now pay your family debt. How to Draw Dragons is 2,583 days overdue. So that's about 7 years and a little bit. Seems like it's probably just random numbers. But say Asriel is now 18, old enough to be going off to college. There's some people who say that the characters are probably close to 11 at the time of Undertale. That discarded manual that never made it into the game signifies that this is at least a different decade than Undertale. So it's kind of interesting that book might have been taken out around that time. This guy, who doesn't really do a whole lot of anything, except for block your access to upstairs, it looks an awful lot like Gaster's follower from Undertale. This guy chilling in this car in the Overworld street. A lot of people are speculating that this is one of the Gaster followers. And while that might be the case, I think he's just supposed to be the guy who's hanging out outside of the spider donut shop in Undertale. But then that sprite was definitely reused for one of the Gaster followers. It's really unclear if it's the same guy and he eventually converts or something like that. I don't think we ever meet this creature anywhere in Undertale. Whereas we've seen this guy before, regardless of if he's the same as that follower or not. But at the very least, I suppose it is worth mentioning. While we're on the subject of Gaster followers, it segues very nicely into talking about the Clam girl. I'm visiting Waterfall from the city. Synchronicity? My neighbor's daughter looks about your age. Her name is Susie. I feel like you two should be friends. You have a neighbor's blessing. Not knowing where I live is no issue. Fate finds a way. In life's grand scheme, she might be why you came here in the first place. You can still meet this character in the PC version of the game. Apparently the only part that is unique to the Switch is in the epilogue of A True Pacifist Route. She now has a new bit of dialogue. So you never met my neighbor's daughter? But please don't despair, because the time you will meet her is fast approaching. And the much more significant part is right after she finishes that little bit of dialogue, the character turns into the grayscale of the other Gaster followers and disappears. So no, the character isn't 100% unique to the Switch, but that bit is. And that would have only been available for people to find about 6 weeks before Deltarune came out. Considering he had been working on it for years, Susie was absolutely a developed, created character at that point. Toby knew exactly what he was doing. Does hint that these games are a little more connected than maybe he's making them out to be. That's an extra cool, extra deep little nugget. There's also a funny little bit of dialogue here where he talks about Undyne blocking his path. I guess I should just run away. Which is referencing the fact that when you choose to not fight Undyne, you can instead just continuously run away. So that's probably a little nod to that boss fight from before. If you peek through the doorway in the library here, you look through the window to the computer lab, there seems to be a dog inside working at a computer. Seems like it's making a game, seems like you shouldn't interrupt it. Seems like when the game's finished, you can go in. You just have to trust the dog. So it's kind of a direct reference to Toby Fox there working away on the game. If you check it a second time, you look through the window and they're just playing the maracas. If this dog's a stand-in for Toby, then put those maracas down and get to work on Chapter 2, Toby. It's not doing any work at all. This might take a while. Well, it's a good chance that the dog working away at the computer lab is self-referential for Toby. Others have pointed out that it might simultaneously be referencing the secret ending to Silent Hill 2, where that game is being controlled by a dog. If you read this bulletin board in the library, there's an anime review. Your options are yes or no. And some people have said that this is likely a reference to JoJo. No. I myself am not super familiar with it, but I'll take people's word for it that that's probably a reference. If you read it, it's a monthly toon review from Mew Mew Kissy Cutie 2. This reviewer had Mew Mew 2 as her first exposure to the series, and let her tell you it makes Mew Mew 1 look like a dumpster with sparkly cat ears. With a darker storyline and more mature themes, the second one treats the viewer like a real adult, which might be a little bit of a meta thing that Deltarune is potentially darker and more adult than Undertale. Sorta, kinda. But it goes on and on about what they do and don't like about it. Signed, the anonymous yellow lizard, which would be Alphys, and it's kind of a funny contrast to the fact that she really hated Mew Mew Kissy Cutie 2 in Undertale, but loves it in Deltarune. There's another silly book in the library. Please remember my name. Please! I wrote a book to help you remember. By Hot's Fire Guy. This is obviously referencing Heat's Flamesman, a character from the first game who is obsessed with being remembered, whose name somehow ends up being incredibly forgettable. He's like one of my favorite characters. There's a million characters who reappear from the original game, all with different designs, which is pretty interesting. For example, Undyne no longer has an eye patch. The standout exception here is that Sans looks the exact same. What was once Grillby's in Undertale has now been taken over and is now Sans' shop. When you talk to Sans, one of the options is you can talk to him about friends. I just moved here, so I hardly know anyone. Why? Got anyone I should know better? My mom. Your mother, huh? Too late. I already befriended your mom last night. Not a secret or anything, but this SOB's over here making jokes about sleeping with your mom. Let's give Goat Mom some love here. There's little figures in the windows here. I just kind of took it as being Toriel had some sort of figurines hanging out on the windowsills there. Some have suggested that it looks a little bit like a mini storyboard for when Asriel helps out the first human. Sure, it's not exact, but the light beam and everything, it's kind of subtle. I could see that being an intentional, hidden in plain sight sort of thing. Toriel used to talk about wanting to be a teacher in Undertale, so it's very nice and interesting to see that she did become one in Deltarune. Someone told me there was something very specific to come looking for in Toriel's kindergarten classroom. It wasn't readily apparent, but it's some kind of primitive sculpture. Who knows what it represents? Well, when you look a little bit closer... I'm just kidding, it is faked. I did want to address this one because people were asking about it. The image that was getting shared around and everything was a fake image. I just kind of recreated it just to mess with people a little bit. So no, there is no lost meme hidden in Toriel's room. Although now I kind of wish that there was. You can actually find your own personal locker, which is empty, and one that used to be your brother's. Nothing interesting to do with either locker, they just are there in the school. Originally in Undertale, when you check Toriel's oven, it mentions that she likely uses her fire magic to keep it as clean as she does. When you look at it in Deltarune, there's some cinnamony batter caked on the stovetop. And seeing as Toriel's just kind of like a kindergarten teacher here, she might not have any magic powers. You can ask Toriel all sorts of questions. If you ask specifically about yourself, oh, you've grown up so much, someday soon you'll be going to university. Remember when you were little, you asked when your horns were going to grow in. So we bought you that headband with the little red horns on it. Oh, you wore it for months. Whatever happened to it? Now this is interesting because Asriel never had horns, seeing as how young they were. But at the end, when Rouxls takes off their hat, there are red horns there. But if Chris's brother is Asriel, and by trying to emulate Asriel, Chris started wearing red horns, that kind of indicates that they did grow in later in life. Still not saying they're the same person, it just kind of further contributes to the fact that those characters are connected. Weirdly, you can actually go to the mayor's office and the receptionist assumes that you're complaining about your teacher, Alphys. If you don't like her, please blame your mother for getting her hired. So maybe Toriel's been a teacher for a long time, or she's just a very influential member of the community. One last little bit about Toriel. There's some unused dialogue hidden in the Deltarune files. Now, while it is totally unused in this game, it does share some similarities with what you find in an Echo Flower on Undertale runs where you killed Toriel. I want to draw attention to this because several people said it in the comments. They pointed out that the alphabet on the top in Toriel's room is not correct. I'm not sure where people are getting that from. Sure, it's really cramped since it's only 3 pixels high, but they're as close to the real letters as they could possibly be. So I don't buy it. I think that's the real alphabet. Here we have another returning character from Undertale. I like the vibe of the waitress here. Maybe I should sign up? Nah, serving drinks wouldn't really suit a fire elemental. which is kind of a funny jab at the fact that Grillby is a bartender in Undertale. This lion character is also in Undertale, and talks extensively about being jealous of Mettaton's dress. Now it's funny to see this character wearing a uniform that is quite dress-like. It's a regular sink, and when you interact with a second sink, it's a clone of the other sink. Perhaps there was originally one tall sink that was cut in half to create both of them. I mean, it is just kind of a funny joke. It's a callback to the growing sink in Papyrus's house. This one's a little weird. I don't really know what to make of it. This big purple cat asks you, "Hey neighbor Baber, when's your brother Doug gonna come by?" He talks about missing your brother but not blaming him for leaving. I hope he remembers us eating oranges and getting our stomachs pumped. Because cats can't actually eat citrus, they will get sick. But people have suggested that maybe the larger reference here is to the old 90s cartoon Doug. Doug's neighbor in that was this giant purple man named Mr. Dink. There's even a whole thing in the show where Doug breaks Mr. Dink's grill.
Mr. Dink is really upset. What's he gonna say when I tell him I broke his brand new grill and ruined his big barbecue?
Here we have a broken grill hanging out behind the cat. I've seen a little Doug, not a lot, but that one would have totally blown me by. I don't think I would have appreciated that that's possibly a reference. It's kind of obscure. It's an unexpected reference to begin with, and it's layered in there kind of oddly, so I think very easy to miss. You can go knocking on some of these doors, and this one in particular, that sounds like the knock of a beginner. Come back when you've gotten better at knocking. And you can run around and knock on doors as much as you want. It doesn't ever actually change. But someone did point out that there's a character in Undertale in Snowdin who's actually amazed by your knocking abilities. So it's probably just a little bit of a callback to that. You can't actually become a professional knocker. Same as how I did kind of a specific character highlight reel with Toriel there. Let's dig into Noelle a little bit. There's quite a few little hints, but it's pretty clear that Noelle's mom is the mayor of this town. There's some mentions of her mom being very busy. She doesn't like to be bothered at work. Noelle's house is behind this giant ornate gate in the middle of town. In the south of town, there's a bear in the town hall who talks all about the mayor and politics. This is of course a returning character from Undertale who talks politics in Snowdin. The mayor is very clearly referred to as being a she, and someone who heavily prioritizes work. Not only does she act icy, but she always keeps her AC on full blast. So even if Noelle's mom doesn't end up being another reindeer, maybe she's at least another winter or holiday-themed monster. That chill I feel is this what politics feels like? The artwork seen in this front room of the mayor's office has the orange-brown color palette of the opening cutscene in Undertale. There's a small pine tree kept in the corner of the office, the type of tree that's like most commonly used for Christmas trees. And just in case people didn't know this on their own, once you go and talk to Noelle and her father in the hospital, and hear their many, many Christmas puns, Noelle just literally means Christmas. Their last name is Holiday. Her dad is Rudy or Rudolph. He calls you Christmas. He talks about getting tangled in light displays. Noelle has a red nose, deer in headlights. These two are a little obsessed with being reindeer and the holiday season, I think. But once you've gone through all this dialogue, you can go and chat to Noelle alongside the gate here. Similar to there being a dialogue tree with sands that you can't really do without cheating the system a little bit, there is one little bit of branching dialogue here with Noelle that you'll miss out on by making a selection. After first catching up a little bit and just talking about school a little, Noelle asks you what you want to talk about. You can select Susie. That's right, you were with Susie. When you didn't come back to class, I was worried, but everything turned out okay, I think? Chris, can I ask you something if that's okay? Susie, I'm kind of curious what she's like, you know? There's several hints throughout the game that Noelle is crushing super hard on Susie. There's a bunch of them, but the first one I know of is when Noelle tries to volunteer to go to the supply closet with Susie to get extra chalk. But then Noelle gets totally cock-blocked because Chris is still looking for a partner. You also kind of interrupt Noelle and her dad, and Noelle might have been pitching the idea of asking Susie out. I think there might be one or two more hints sprinkled throughout, but we don't need to cover every single one. I mean, who doesn't wonder about her? She never talks to anyone. So Chris, could you tell me about her if that's okay? and there's a few different options here that you can choose. Once you've selected one of these, you can't go back and select the other, so I'm saving you guys the replay there. You can simply say she's nice. What? She's a nice person? Really? Like, really? Honestly? Truly? I mean, that's just what I was hoping, but... Wait, this isn't another trick, is it, Chris? Like when you put ketchup on your arms and told me it was blood? Really? You're serious? You're totally serious? Gosh, then maybe I should try talking to her. But if I die, you're paying for my funeral, Chris. Though honestly, if she's nice, I might die too. Super adorable. There's hints that Noelle will play a larger part in Chapter 2, and I'm kind of hoping that that relationship gets explored a little bit in Chapter 2. But there are other options. You can say that she eats chalk. What? She was eating the chalk? Really? Wait, you're teasing me, aren't you, Chris? Like when you told me Ice E was real and eats kids. So Des smacked you with a wiffle bat till you stopped lying? Huh, you're telling the truth? Seriously? Then what colored chalk does she like? And do you think she likes the thin or the thick kind? Wait, maybe making our lunchbox full of chalk is stupid. No judgments from Noelle, she's still crushing hard. Noelle talks about her friend Des, possibly just Des. Based on the spelling and based on what I think is going on here, it's probably Des. Noelle talks about Des whacking you with a wiffle ball bat. Sounds a little similar to another character in a similar type of game with a similar type of name, doesn't it? You can also just say she's terrible. She what? She smashed you against the lockers? Gosh, Chris, I'm really sorry. That's just awful. I thought Susie was good, just maybe it would take someone special to find her good side? She really is terrible, isn't she? Chris, I'm so sorry you have to go through this. In fact, I wonder if Alphys would let us switch partners? I mean, you know, so you wouldn't have to be the one who, gets to be slammed into lockers and stuff anymore. Wait, I don't think I phrased that correctly. I actually had to do a double take when reading that myself. I thought I had read it incorrectly. A little bit kinky there. I think Noelle just admitted she's okay with getting roughed up a little. And the final option is to just kind of pause. Seriously, Chris? But I help you all the time. The least you can do is give me a little information. Like, does she like metal music? Is she really an obligate carnivore? Does she really have a tail underneath her jacket? Which is kind of funny because later in the game it's completely proved that she does not have a tail. If you get the item the Jevil's tail and equip it to Susie, you get this little bit of flavor text at the bottom where she says that she always figured she would grow a tail someday. Or sorry Chris, it's not any of my business, is it? I blew it, didn't I? So no matter which choice, Noelle still has her little fantasy about Susie. Adorable. I'm really a big fan of how this has been set up in this chapter so far. If you do try and follow it up with a second question in the same playthrough... Oh, can I ask you something else about her? Well, did it seem like she... Wait, you definitely wouldn't know that. I think basically Noelle was just gonna ask, is she into girls? Maybe that's a little presumptuous of me, but that seems like that's where she was going, but she won't take it any further than that. Kind of closes off the line of communication there. Someone pointed out that the antlers on the reindeer folk look a little bit like the DeviantArt logo. I mean, you don't have a lot of pixels to work with here, so that could just be coincidental. But hey, a lot of artists started out posting things to DeviantArt. I wouldn't be surprised if Toby had a profile as well. Another thing people pointed out that they found weird was the fact that Noelle has antlers at all. In most ungulates, deers, and such, the females don't grow antlers. Reindeer, which are actually the same as caribou, can be an exception. It's not always the case, but there are populations of caribou where the female grow antlers as well. So it still makes sense in the end. A lot of people in the comments had questions about going behind any of the buildings, seeing as that was a thing you could do with Sans' house in Undertale. If you go up and around the corner, it's kind of strange because these three rooftops don't fit with the buildings underneath, but no, there is no way to access the backside of those buildings. You know, there's lots of opportunity to go behind buildings and stuff. I've checked them all, it doesn't seem like there's anything you can actually do. Knock knock. No response, but the distant trousel of bones. Bone Trousel is the name of Papyrus's theme track. What's interesting is you can't talk to Papyrus, you don't interact with him, you don't see him anywhere in this game, although the sound effect for his dialogue still exists in the game files. When you're talking to Sans, you can ask him about friends. He says, I just moved here, I could use some friends. You say, me, why not be friends with me? Whoa there, Tiger. You can't just jump straight into friendship, it takes time. Alright, that's enough time. Take this. Call it whenever you feel like. Now you have Sans' number to call. Now normally when you call this number, it'll put you through a string of different options, and then when it comes out the other end, it says not Sans' number. And when you try to call it, the phone kept ringing infinitely. So for whatever reason, Sans, you jerk, gives you a fake number. Now because you normally wouldn't be able to call it multiple times, and there's no save point in the town, you would have to replay the game just to see what these other options are. I'm playing in the debug mode right now, so you can kind of fiddle around with things a little bit more, so I'll just reload in town and roll through the different options. When you call the number, it rings a few times. Hello? You've reached the hotline for idiot babies. Please press 1 for idiots, 2 for babies, 3 for idiot babies, and 4 for none. 1 for idiots. You're an idiot. To tell you the truth, I'm one too. Let's try our best, okay? Number 2. You're an baby. I'm one too. Let's try our best. Says the same thing, basically. The third option, you're an idiot baby. Tell you the truth, I'm one too. Let's try our best. And finally, 4 for none. Why'd you call the hotline for idiot babies if you aren't an idiot baby? And then they rudely hang up on you. Hopefully I saved people from having to play through the game 4 times for that one joke. If after that you try to call not Sans' number, ring, 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 the phone rings infinitely, nobody ever picks up, there's nothing more to it. Sans then has a new piece of dialogue regardless of which branches you chose, or whether or not you followed it up with not Sans' number. And when you ask him to talk about yourself again, he says, sorry, I don't hang out with idiot babies. They compete with my sociological niche. And I believe if you choose idiots or babies, it plays out the same way. There's a little angel doll on Rudy's desk here. Oh right, you and Azzy tried to make one too, but you wasted the whole time making huge wings for it. Which is probably referencing the whole Angel of Death final form Asriel thing from Undertale. Far south of town, there's this door that's locked, covered in vines, all by itself. You can't really do anything with it. But when you stand even further south, kind of away from the door there, you start getting these weird sound effects playing. It's pretty dull and doesn't sound like a whole lot of anything, but if you turn it up and set it to 666, it's just another cool little tie-in there of Gaster being associated with 666. So that's pretty damn interesting, maybe something to be expanded on in Chapter 2. There's actually several other possible ties to Gaster in this game. There are a couple characters in the game that look a little bit like Gaster. Interestingly, they're the 2 shopkeepers, one of which is actually Rouxls Kaard. You can just see in the smile, the missing eye, there's just some very vague similarities going on there. Out of a very extensive original soundtrack, 9 of these are confirmed to use leitmotifs of Gaster's theme. A lot of theories about Gaster in this game floating around now. Gerson, the silly little turtle from Undertale, seems to have passed away because there's now a Gerson Boo memorial bench. And just next to that, we have a Gerson gravestone, renowned historian, author, and teacher. All 3 of these gravestones are actually quite significant. Crystal, a snowy gemstone for a proud mother. Mutler, a big bone for the leader of the pack. And Shira, a karaoke microphone for a brave singer. Now these are actually gravestones for the 3 amalgamates from Undertale. Or rather the monsters who would have become the amalgamates. So it's just kinda nice to have them resting in peace rather than being horrible twisted monsters. You can talk to Burger Pants, who's now working for Icy's Pizza. You can talk to him about the people he works with. One of the things he has to say is, purple guy, man, that guy, you gotta... Actually, does that guy even work here? Which is presumably a reference to Five Nights at Freddy's. I mean, he's probably likely just talking about this, but being a pizzeria and the specific wording and everything, it seems to be a reference to that. Here we can see Napstablook's house. I'm afraid no one's home right now. There's theories that it's actually Mettaton staying in here. Afraid no one's home, darling. Why don't you prance on home? Knock, knock again. I'm telling you they're not home right now. Oh, you just wanted to talk to me? My apologies, beautiful. I'm afraid I'm a bit of a nobody. And so the darling, beautiful, things like that, it seems like Mettaton is staying within Napstablook's house, whereas Mettaton's house is usually next door. It leans the opposite direction, and it has a pink color. Kind of the new running theory is that this is Mettaton when they are still a ghost, when they're Hapstablook, as Papyrus would call them. In this world, Alphys either isn't the brilliant scientist that she is in Undertale, or they never crossed paths. But likely what's going on is Mettaton is still a ghost, uncomfortable with their body, and as such has become kind of a recluse, and now just hides away in here. The interesting thing is that Napstablook does appear to still be in the game, and that he's actually hanging out at the police station. You knock on the door of the police station, someone's coming up to the window, they just close the blinds. Seems like the police aren't really feeling it right now. This is a line that Napstablook uses when you fight them. It's part of their dialogue for one of their non-attacks. Another interesting thing is that at the end of Undertale, it says that Napstablook kind of avoided the Asriel apocalypse, or whatever you want to call it, by simply closing the blinds and hiding away. So this is very in character, and it would make sense because Undyne and Napstablook were buddies in Undertale. They both ended up as police officers together. Kind of seems like Napstablook is the outgoing one, and Mettaton is the introvert this time. It's an unlabeled book. You look inside. Oh, I accidentally returned my personal journal instead of my book. Oh no, they're putting it into their catalog. Oh no, I have to take it out every time I want to write a new entry. The all lowercase, the overuse of ellipses, the overuse of oh no. It's a good chance that Napstablook is the one who's taking this in and out all the time, filling out the journal. In this world, Mettaton is still a ghost. Alphys never made a body for them. I'm afraid I'm a bit of a no-body, which is a pretty damn good play on words there. I'm a big fan of that. If that wasn't Toby's intention, then he should take credit for it as that, because it's very funny. This entire interaction plays out very similarly to when you meet Asgore in Undertale during either a neutral or pacifist run. Is someone there? Just a moment, I've almost finished watering these flowers. Here we are. Howdy, how can I... This is another one of those super on-the-nose things, but these 7 flowers that Asgore has stashed away up here are the same colors as Flowey and the human souls. Alternately, with the egg, you can go to Asgore's house, and he only has a lowly pickle jar sitting in the fridge, so you can help him, stay fed and put the egg in the fridge with the pickle, but when you come back to the fridge, it now says there's 2 eggs in the fridge, so... pretty weird little interaction there. Another layer to this is when you drop the egg, get the what egg dialogue, it suddenly just appears in the fridge. And you see, for some reason, a lone egg. It's an egg alongside the pickle jar rather than it turning it into an egg as well. For some reason, there's a lot of weird, separate, different possible interactions with this egg and this fridge. You decide to pass on it. I thought this was kind of interesting. On the floor, there's all these scattered papers in Asgore's place. It's a note. It says, "No rent received again. Stop giving away flowers. Start selling them. You have 1 month. See." It would be awful strange for the mayor to be in charge of evictions, but maybe we're getting a little bit of a hint of what the mayor's name is going to be. If we're going off characters we've met, there's Caddy, but that doesn't make sense. And C Round, technically, but that was only in the Dark World. I'm curious, I don't think there's anything more to be garnered from that in this current chapter, but maybe we'll finally find out who C is coming up in Chapter 2. Calling in the Dark World doesn't work at all when you call from in town. Toriel basically just tells you to walk home or that she's busy, and it's pretty basic dialogue. It's slightly different if you call from within the house. If you're in the bathroom of your own house and use the cell phone to call home, it rings. "Hello, Dreamer residents, who might this be? Chris? Don't make me come over there." For some reason, there's a lot of ways to mess with Toriel. From the coming and going of the house, flushing the toilet, calling her repeatedly. I don't know if any of these fall under Easter eggs or anything like that, but it is fun to prank your goat mom. This isn't buried deep or hidden away or anything, but there is a small little reference to Super Smash Bros. Remember that video game you and Asriel used to play? What was it called? Super Smashing Fighters? When he was very little, he loved the little green lizard, which would obviously be Yoshi. We even had a birthday party for him themed around it. Your father painted all these eggs with spots as decoration. Oh, your brother loved it. Until the next day your father cooked all that for breakfast, your brother just kept crying. Ever since, he's hated that book about eating green eggs, which would be Dr. Seuss's Green Eggs and Ham. Something very specific and very odd that someone pointed out to me is that the clock in this first classroom here reads 6. The one in Alphys' room is set to about 2 or 3 o'clock, and finally the one in Toriel's room is set to about 10 o'clock. I have no idea whether 3 different clocks are different. You can only interact with one, and it's a small little joke about it not being time for class. But that means those sprites weren't reused, right? There had to be unique sprites for each clock. But why go through the trouble of making every clock different? And this one clock in particular actually points to 6 and 6, which is an impossible time. If it was actually 6:30, the hour hand would be halfway to 7. Obviously 6 is a very recurring, very important number to this series, but I have no idea what's going on with the other 2 clocks. If you go to the far east of town, past Asgore's place, these guys talk about hanging out next to the river and how nice that is. If you stand in this spot and just kind of hang out there for a few seconds, then eventually we get an old friend who emerges from the lake there to chat with. There is a point in the dialogue tree where you can't backtrack on your options, and so people asked me to fill that in, same as I did for Noelle and Sans in the last installment. Hey there, noticed you were here. It's me. You know me, right? Of course you do. I'm real popular. I just don't have any friends. But it's okay here, because you're here. Will you be my friend? You can say no, and he goes away. Oh, that poor guy. You actually can't coax him back out. Even if you leave and come back, he's still gone. So yeah, don't say no to being his friend. Yes, I'll be your friend. Oh, I'm so happy here. I'm so happy. I don't know what to do. I don't remember being this happy before. What's your name, friend? And here's where you kind of have a few options. First, you can just say Chris. That's you. That's a real nice name for a friend. Oh, excuse me, I forgot to introduce myself. Actually, since no one talks to me, I forgot my own name. Chris, can you give me a name? And now there's even more options to go through. You can call him Disgusting. And he goes away again. I'll name myself Chris for half of these and Hippopotamus for half of these. Being able to tell someone that your name is Hippopotamus is a reference to Mega Man Legends. Hyper Hopper. Hippopotamus, it's you. Big name, but it's worth it. Hippopotamus, can you give me a name? Asriel the Second. Asriel 2, Sounds familiar. Feels like a memory. It feels like that good boy that threw those good cornflakes in the water for me. Wait, what was the name? Cereal? Yeah, I love cereal. Bathe me in flakes. Thank you for giving me a name. I'll cherish it, you hear? Hyper Potato Mask? That's your name, right? I want to tell you something. Tomorrow. Something I can only tell a friend. Come back soon, you hear? I'll say Chris again this time. This time, your name can be Beauty. Wow, what a wonderful name. Feels like my self-esteem's in full bloom. Feels like my head's about to flower. Wait, what was the name? Bootus? Yeah, perfect. Which, total side note, side reference thing, might be a reference to Pootus from Team Fortress 2. The taste, the smell, thank you for giving me a name. I'll cherish it, you hear? Christmas? That's your name, right? I want to tell you something tomorrow. Something I can only, same thing. And so now the remaining option will be to give Onion San their proper name back. Onion. It's perfect, you hear? I don't know what it means, but it's perfect. Feels like it's shaped like me. Feels like it smells like me. Wait, what was the name? Yum? Yeah, it's perfect. Yum, that's my name. Thank you for giving me a name. I'll cherish it, you hear? And then it plays out the same hyper potato mask and blah blah blah, all that. See you tomorrow. There you have it, all of the onion sand dialogue. This got asked a lot in the original video. No, you can't come back tomorrow because chapter 1 ends when you go to bed. That is the end of this free version of the game. We'll have to wait for the entirety of Deltarune to be complete before we can actually revisit the next day. I'll let you guys discover that for yourselves to read the dialogue. Now, right from the beginning of the game, when you see this cage in the wagon, it looks like it's seen quite a few crashes. There's like a weird, ominous stain going on beside it there. It's not really sure what's going on. That maybe becomes more relevant at the very end of the game, so endgame spoilers here. So the way this whole end scene plays out is already pretty damn messed up. But the fact that it said that the cage has been used often and there's a weird stain in the corner kind of hints at the idea, the possibility that this has happened before, that the soul is commonly being trapped within this cage. I don't know what the hell the implications of any of that may or may not be. It just seems to be kind of an interesting little thing to maybe consider here. We'll save that one for the game theorists. And during this segment, you can actually control the soul within the cage. So what's going on there? Was Chris a puppet the whole time? Just being controlled by this loose soul? I don't know, that's too much for me. There's been quite a bit of riddling around in the back-end code for this game already. There's a peculiar bit of unused dialogue that appears during the return. That's what the game calls itself when you defeat the final boss and return to town in the endgame. The lines read, "Where? Where am I? Hello? Anyone? Is anybody out there? Someone, anyone, can you hear me? It's dark. It's so dark here. Someone, anyone, if you can hear me, say something. Please." Pretty spooky call for help overall. A strong possibility is that this was meant for being behind the door with the vines, but we can't really know. If you right-click on the game file and look at its properties, the file version is listed as 666. There's some interesting things to do with 6 in the Undertale world, like the 6 human souls. 666 is associated with Gaster. It might not be a direct reference to anything, it might just be a fun little thing that Toby slipped in there. Now, I feel like this is going to turn into more weird conspiracy theory stuff, but in that opening sequence it says the vessel and creator will be discarded. But technically, in the app data on your computer, that stuff is still stored. That might just be by nature of how the game code is written, but it might actually implicate that things aren't as they seem, and even though it tells you it's discarded, it was stored away somewhere. Even more interesting, if you dig through those files, there is a love meter. It defaults to 1.000 and it never changes because love isn't in the game the same way it was in Undertale. This could be a weird leftover relic of Toby's coding from Undertale, or again, it could hint at future things for this story. This is getting into some weird back-end stuff, but the way that Game Maker works, which Undertale and Deltarune were both made in, each individual room is given a code number, so if you change your character's location in the code to 131 or anything higher than that, anything that isn't associated with an actual room in the game will instead transport you to this thing, and you instead have Doggy Rune. It's kind of an obscure secret, but I think Toby knew that people were going to go rooting around in the game files. Setting your character location to anywhere that doesn't actually exist in-game instead sends you to Deltarune. The dog check is something Toby also used in Undertale. It's a bit of a bug testing tool, while also a way to mess with cheaters, but at the same time it kind of rewards you, because you get this unique screen and a song specifically made to go along with it. And that's just fun. Not like Undertale fun. Some of the folks over on Reddit discovered an awesome series of prompts that you get when you copy and erase save files. There's all sorts of different interactions that play out there. I think you have to do it on a fresh install, so I don't want to do it on my own save file, so I am going to directly use theirs. First off, if you try to copy a file that does not exist, it is barren and cannot be copied. Choose the one to copy, choose the target for the reflection, the division is complete. Now copy your file and choose the target as the one you just copied, overwrite or do not. If you say do not, it retained its original shape, same sequence of things there, and do overwrite, it will be subsumed. It conformed to the reflection. If you try to copy a save file onto itself, it reads it is immune to its own image. Choosing one to erase, you choose an empty slot, it was already gone. Select to erase, go to your copy, yes or no. No, then it was spared. Erase again to the copy, yes. Then it will be destroyed, erase or do not, then it was spared. Erase, truly erase it, yes, definitely confirm. It was as if it was never there at all. I left this to the very end of the video because it's just crazy, and I hadn't seen anyone else talk about it, so good work to those guys over on Reddit who found that one. It's really cool. There's a lot of interesting comparisons here as to what our save file actually means, whether it actually exists. That obviously is saying a lot about the game, and builds very much off Undertale's endgame concepts of destroying and creating worlds. We even specifically see some of that here. We're absolutely gonna have to wait for the full Deltarune to really have any answers to that. Genuinely, thank you guys all so much for the support. If you haven't seen it, go and watch my Pieces of Gaster video. If you like this sort of stuff, you're going to love that. I'm trying to make it the ultimate Gaster theorizing experience. I won't keep you any longer. Go check that out. Give it a shot. You're gonna like it. I'm so excited to be sharing this. I think it's just a fun little way to say thank you, and kind of like having my spaghetti and eating it too. I get to keep those highly viewed videos over on the original channel, but now this new channel gets this extra bit of love with the primo viewing experience. I hope longtime viewers appreciate some of the expansions, additions, and revisions that went into this rather than simply re-editing those original videos. Yeah, it was a pretty big undertaking. It feels good to clean up all the instances where I was saying Deltarune. I apologized for that at some point in those 4 videos, but now it should all be Deltarune. I hope. Thank you to patrons of the channel for all your support. Check that out for some cool behind the scenes, the opportunity to vote in polls, and to participate in developer interviews. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.